Hello everyone, viewers. We tend to think of history as a straight line, a series of rational decisions, battles won and lost, treaties signed. We see kings and queens as chess players, moving pieces on a grand board, their fates determined by strategy and strength. But what if that's only half the story? What if, in the dark corners of the past, there are other forces at play? Forces that don't care for logic or politics. Today, we're not talking about quaint superstitions. We are talking about three of the most vicious royal curses in European history. Curses that weren't just spoken, they were fulfilled to the letter. Every single one of them came true, with a precision that will make the hair on your arms stand up. Our first story begins in fire, on a small island in the heart of Paris, on a cold evening in March 1340. His name is Jacques de Molay, and he is the 23rd and final Grand Master of the Knights Templar. As the flames lick at his feet, he does not scream. He stares directly at the royal palace, at the window where the man who condemned him watches, and with his last breath he unleashes a torrent of vengeance that will shatter a kingdom. To understand the venom in his final words, you have to understand who the Templars were and what King Philip IV of France did to them. For nearly 200 years, the Knights Templar were the stuff of legend. They were the ultimate warrior monks, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of the Crusades. They were the Vatican's special forces, accountable only to the Pope himself. Their white mantles, emblazoned with a blood-red cross, were a symbol of piety, courage, and immense, untouchable power. They weren't just soldiers. They were the world's first multinational corporation. They invented international banking. A pilgrim could deposit gold in their Paris temple and, with a coded letter of credit, withdraw it in Jerusalem. They owned fleets of ships, vast tracts of land across Europe and the Middle East, farms, vineyards, fortresses. Their wealth was staggering, eclipsing that of many kingdoms. And in Paris they had built a fortress, a temple that was the financial heart of Europe, a place so secure that even kings stored their treasures there. One of those kings was Philip IV of France. But behind that mask was a man of cold, calculating ambition. He was a modernizer, a centralizer of power. He believed in the absolute authority of the crown, and he was perpetually, desperately in debt. He had debased the currency, taxed the clergy, and expelled the Jews from France, seizing all their assets. It was never enough. His wars with England and Flanders had bled, and every single day from his window in the Louvre Palace he could see the imposing towers of the Templar Temple, a constant, infuriating reminder of an organization within his own kingdom that was wealthier, more powerful, and utterly beyond his control. The Templars were Philip's ultimate target. They had the money he needed, and they represented a supranational power that defied his vision of absolute monarchy. Philip was a master of propaganda and legal manipulation. He couldn't attack them with an army, so he would destroy them from within with whispers and lies, working with his ruthless chancellor. Guillaume de Nogaret-Philippe began a secret, multi-year campaign to build a case against the Templars. He collected disgruntled ex-members. Criminals offered pardons in exchange for testimony. And the stories they concocted were horrific, designed to shock the sensibilities of a deeply religious medieval Europe. They accused the Templars of spitting on the cross during their secret initiation rites, of denying Christ and worshipping a demonic idol, a severed head named Baphomet. They were accused of institutionalized sodomy, of heresy, of every depraved act imagined. It was a smear campaign of genius, level malevolence. With a dossier of forced confessions in hand, Philip made his move. He strong-armed the weak and pliable Pope Clement V, a Frenchman who owed his papacy to Philip's influence. On Friday, the 13th of October 1307, a date so infamous it may be the origin of the superstition of Friday the 13th, at dawn, his men struck simultaneously. Every Templar in the kingdom was arrested. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, was apprehended in Paris. He had been in France to meet with the Pope, lured there under false pretenses. The shockwave was immense. The most respected order in Christendom was dismantled overnight. What followed was 7 years of hell. The Templars were They were starved, isolated, and systematically tortured. Their feet were roasted over fires until the bones fell from their flesh. They were stretched on the rack until their shoulders dislocated under unimaginable agony. Many confessed to the fabricated charges. Some, however, refused. Jacques de Molay initially confessed under torture, likely to spare his brothers more pain. But when he was brought, the old warrior re-emerged. He recanted everything, proclaiming the order's innocence and purity. For Philip, this was an act of defiance he could not tolerate. A recanted confession meant a relapse into heresy, and the penalty for that was death. So we returned to that island in the Seine on the 18th of March. 1314, 2 men are to be burned, Jacques de Molay and Geoffrey de Charny. They are tied to the stake. The wood piled high around them. A crowd gathers, a mix of the curious and the horrified. King Philip is likely watching from his palace. As the executioner lights the pyre, de Molay does something extraordinary. He asks to be turned to face the cathedral of Notre Dame, and he raises his bound hands in prayer. Then, as the smoke and flames swirl around him, his voice rings. It is not a plea for mercy. It is a summons. He looks toward the palace, toward the Vatican, and he screams his curse. "Pope Clement, Chevalier Guillaume de Nogaret, King Philip, before this year is out, I summon you to appear before the tribunal of God to receive your just punishment. Cursed! Cursed! You shall be cursed to the 13th generation of your blood." Imagine the scene. The crackle of the fire, the gasps of the crowd, and this terrible prophecy hanging in the air. For the men in power, it was probably just the ravings of a dying heretic, an empty threat. They were wrong. The curse began to work with terrifying speed. The first to fall was Pope Clement V. Just over a month later, on the 20th of April. He died in agony. The cause was recorded as a stomach ailment, possibly dysentery, but chronicles of the time say his body was consumed by a disease so foul it was as if he were rotting from the inside out. During the vigil, a bolt of lightning struck the church where his body lay, and the resulting fire was so intense that his corpse was almost completely incinerated before anyone could extinguish it. One down. Next was Guillaume de Nogaret, the king's iron-fisted chancellor, the architect of the Templars' downfall. The historical record is a bit murky, but most accounts agree he died suddenly within weeks of the Pope, believed to have been poisoned by agents of his many enemies, 2 down. All eyes now turned to the king. Philip the Fair was at the height of his power. He was only 46 years old. It seemed as if he might escape the Templars' curse. Then, in early November, while hunting in the forests near Fontainebleau, his horse stumbled. Philip was thrown to the ground. He didn't appear to be seriously injured, perhaps a broken limb, but he was taken back to his palace, and he never recovered. A strange, wasting sickness took hold. He suffered what was likely a stroke, lingered for a few weeks without being able to speak, and on the 29th of November, 1314, he died. Less than 9 months after Jacques de Molay's execution, all 3 men named in the curse were dead. Coincidence, perhaps, a stroke of bad luck for 3 powerful but mortal men. It's possible. But the curse didn't stop there. De Molay had... And it was here that the curse revealed its true, patient, and devastating power. King Philip IV left behind 3 strong, healthy sons to secure his dynasty, the House of Capet, which had ruled France for over 300 years. His eldest son became Louis X. His reign was short and disastrous. His wife was caught in a scandalous affair, and he died after just 2 years on the throne passed to Philip's second son, Philip V. He reigned for 6 years and produced 4 daughters, but no sons. Under a new interpretation of Salic law, which barred women from the throne, his daughters were passed over. The crown went to the 3rd and final son, Charles IV. Like his brother, he reigned for 6 years, and like his brother, he produced only daughters. In the space of just 14 years, all 3 of Philip the Fair's sons had reigned and died without producing a single male successor to carry on the direct Capetian line. The dynasty was extinguished. It was an unprecedented biological catastrophe. The curse had, methodically, efficiently and completely wiped out Philip's direct legacy, and the consequences were cataclysmic. The closest male relative was King Edward III of England through his mother, Isabella, who was Philip the Fair's daughter. The French nobility, horrified at the prospect of an English king, dredged up the Salic law once more and gave the crown to Philip's nephew, inaugurating the House of Valois. Edward III did not accept this. He claimed the French throne for himself. And in 1337 this dispute exploded into the conflict that we now know as the 100 Years' War. A brutal, devastating war that tore France apart for over a century, causing the deaths of millions. All of it, every last drop of blood, can be traced back to that moment. A king's greed, a false accusation, and a curse screamed from a burning pyre. The curse of a dying man. It brought a 300-year-old dynasty to its knees and plunged a nation into a century of war. From a curse that shatters a kingdom, we travel south to a sun-drenched strip of coastline on the Mediterranean. The Principality of Monaco, a place synonymous with glamour, wealth, and James Bond casinos. It's a modern fairy, but beneath the veneer of luxury yachts and Formula One races lies a much older, darker story. A curse not of fire and political ruin, but of the heart. A curse that promises its rulers wealth and power, but denies them the one thing they can't buy. Happiness. The story begins in the 13th century, with the founding of the Grimaldis dynasty. The official history is one of cunning and conquest. In 1297, Francesco Grimaldi, disguised as a Franciscan monk, seized the fortress of Monaco, hiding a sword in his robes. But legend whispers a different, more sinister origin story. It's said that Prince Rainier, I Francesco's kinsman and the first Grimaldi sovereign of Monaco, abducted and violated a beautiful Flemish woman. In some versions of the tale, she is a witch. As she suffered, she cast a curse upon him and all his descendants. Her words, echoing through the centuries, were simple and devastating. Never will a Grimaldi find true happiness in marriage. Think about that. Not a curse of death or poverty or plagues, a curse of intimate, personal, and perpetual sorrow. A curse for centuries. The history of the Grimaldis reads like a laundry list of marital disasters, seemingly proving the witch's prophecy right. There was Claudine, who in the 15th century had it written into her marriage contract that her Grimaldi surname must be preserved, but whose husband, Lambert, was rumoured to have had her assassinated. There was Prince Antoine, who was so openly miserable with his wife Marie of Lorraine that they lived in a state of constant bitter warfare within the palace walls. His daughters were pawns in his dynastic games, forced into loveless political marriages. One of them, Louise Hippolyte, became sovereign, but died of smallpox after less than a year, leaving her scheming husband to rule. The divorces, annulments, bitter infidelities, spouses dying, young children born out of wedlock, for generation after generation, the Grimaldis seemed incapable of sustaining a happy, lasting union. The curse seemed to adapt to the times when political marriages gave way to marrying for love. The curse simply found new, more tragic ways to manifest. Fast forward to the 20th century. Its ruler is Prince Rainier III. He knows that his tiny principality needs a jolt of glamour, of international attention. To survive, he needs a princess. And he finds one in the most famous, elegant, and beloved woman in the world, the American movie star, Grace Kelly. Their meeting in 1955 at the Cannes Film Festival is the stuff of legends. He was a shy, serious, she was Hollywood royalty. An Oscar-winning actress at the peak of her career. The epitome of cool blonde beauty and sophistication. Their courtship was a global sensation. When they married in 1956, it was dubbed the wedding of the century. 1 million flashbulbs went off. The world watched, breathless, as the movie star became a real-life princess. And for a while, it seemed as if they had finally broken the witch's curse. Princess Grace gave up her acting career, devoted herself to her new role, and became a beloved figure in Monaco and around the world. She and Prince Rainier had 3 children, Caroline, Albert, and Steffi Fini. They appeared to be the perfect family. They were photographed on yachts, at glamorous balls for 26 years. They built a life together that was, by all public accounts, a success. The curse, it seemed, had finally gone dormant. And then came the 13th of September, 1982. Princess Grace was driving back to Monaco from their country home with her youngest daughter, 17-year-old Stéphanie. While navigating the treacherous winding roads of the Moyenne Corniche, the same roads she had famously driven in Alfred Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief, suffered a stroke. The car, a Rover P6, veered off the road, plunged down a 120-foot embankment, and flipped over. Stéphanie suffered serious injuries but survived. Princess Grace was pulled from the wreckage unconscious, having sustained catastrophic brain injuries. She never regained consciousness and was taken off life support the following day. She was just 52 years old. The fairy tale had shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. The world was plunged into mourning. Prince Rainier was visibly broken, a man hollowed out by grief. He never remarried and ruled alone for another. The curse, it seemed, had not been broken. It had simply been waiting, biding its time to strike in the most brutal and heart-wrenching way imaginable. It had allowed the Grimaldis to experience true happiness, only to snatch it away, making the loss all the more profound. And the curse didn't stop with Princess Grace's death. Its shadow fell upon her children, as if re-energized by the tragedy Princess Caroline. Her first marriage, a youthful folly to a Parisian banker, ended in divorce after just 2 years. She then found what appeared to be true love with Stefano Casiraghi, a handsome Italian sportsman. They married in 1983 and had 3 children. They were the jet set's golden couple. But in 1990 the curse struck again. Stefano, an avid powerboat racer, was killed in his boat flipped at high speed. Caroline was a widow at 33, left to raise 3 young children alone. She later found happiness again, marrying Prince Ernst August of Hanover, but their marriage has been plagued by his scandalous public behavior, and they now live separate lives. The story of the youngest daughter, Princess Fifani, is one of a rebellious spirit constantly searching for a love that lasts. She had 2 children with a former bodyguard, whom she briefly married and then divorced. She then had a 3rd child with another palace guard. She had a high-profile affair with an elephant trainer and lived with her children in a circus caravan for a time before marrying a Portuguese acrobat. That marriage lasted just 10 months. Even the heir, Prince Albert II, seemed touched by the family's romantic misfortune. For decades he was known as one of Europe's most eligible and longest reigning bachelors. He fathered 2 children out of wedlock before finally marrying South African Olympic swimmer Charlene Wittstock in 2011. But even their union has been dogged by persistent rumors of unhappiness, with Princess Charlene often appearing melancholic in public, earning her the sad nickname, the Sad Princess. A beautiful witch's rage, a dying curse uttered centuries ago. Is it just a morbid family history of bad luck in love, or is the loveless throne of Monaco a real, tangible thing? A prophecy that ensures that for all their wealth and privilege, the Grimaldis will forever be denied the simple happiness that so many others take for granted. If you are finding these tales of history's dark side as fascinating as I do, it helps the channel immensely, and you won't want to miss what is coming next. We're about to delve into the curse that brought down one of the most powerful families the world has ever known. Our final story is the grandest and most terrible of all. It's not about a curse spoken by a single person against a single king. It's about a curse that seems woven into the very DNA of a dynasty. A curse of blood, madness, and tragedy that hounded Europe's most dominant royal house for generations, culminating in an act of violence that set the entire world on fire. This is the curse of the House of Habsburg. For over 600 years, the Habsburgs were the titans of Europe. From a minor noble family in Switzerland, they rose to control a sprawling, multi-ethnic empire that, at its peak, included Austria, Hungary, Spain, the Netherlands, parts of Italy, and vast territories in the Americas. They were the Holy Roman Emperors, the ultimate defenders of the Catholic faith. Their motto was Bella gerant ali tu Felix Austria nube. Let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry. They didn't build their empire with armies so much as with strategic wedding vows. They were masters of dynastic politics. But this strategy contained the seeds of their own destruction. To keep power and property within the family, the Habsburgs began to marry each other. Cousins married cousins, uncles married nieces. For generations, their gene pool became a stagnant pond. This inbreeding had grotesque physical consequences, most famously the Habsburg jaw, a severe underbite and elongated chin that became a family trademark. But the damage wasn't just cosmetic. It is believed this genetic bottleneck also contributed to a host of health problems, stillbirths, and a strain of melancholy, and this, perhaps, was the foundation of the curse, a self-inflicted wound, a corruption of the bloodline that would manifest in a relentless pattern of tragedy. The curse truly began to accelerate its terrible work in the 19th century under the long and weary reign of Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria. He ruled for 68 years, and his reign was an unending parade of personal and he was a man defined by duty, tradition, and profound, unrelenting grief. The first major blow came from his own brother, Maximilian, ambitious and idealistic. Maximilian was lured by French Emperor Napoleon III to accept the newly created throne of Mexico. It was a fool's errand. The Mexican Republicans never accepted him. When French military support was withdrawn, he was captured, and despite pleas for clemency from across Europe, executed by a firing squad in 1867. His final words were, "I forgive everyone, and I ask everyone to forgive me." His wife, Empress Carlotta, had returned to Europe to beg for help. When she heard of his execution, her mind shattered completely. She descended into a severe paranoia, believing assassins were everywhere, and lived out the next 60 years in seclusion, a ghost haunting a Belgian castle, utterly insane with grief. The emperor had lost his brother to a faraway firing squad and his sister-in-law to madness. But the curse was just getting started. It was now coming for the next generation. The hope of the empire rested on Franz Joseph's only son and heir, Crown Prince Rudolf. Rudolf was the opposite of his father. He was intelligent, liberal, and progressive, but also morbid, reckless, and emotionally unstable. He was trapped in a loveless political marriage and clashed constantly with his conservative father over the future of the empire. He felt like a prisoner in a gilded. In the late 1880s, Rudolf began a passionate affair with a beautiful young baroness, Mary Wetzera. She was only 17. He was 30. Their love was a desperate, fatalistic obsession. On the 30th of January, 1889, at the Imperial Hunting Lodge of Merling, the tragedy reached its climax. The exact sequence of events is still debated, but the outcome is not. It was a murder-suicide pact, a final, dramatic act of despair. The Merling incident was a scandal of epic proportions that the monarchy desperately tried to cover up. But more than that, it was a dynastic catastrophe. With one pull of a trigger, the direct line of succession was broken. The empire's future had died in a bloody bedroom in the Vienna woods. Emperor the curse had now turned its attention to the woman at his side. The enigmatic and beautiful Empress Elizabeth, known to the world as Sissi. Sissi was a figure of legend, famed for her breathtaking beauty, her floor-length hair, and her obsession with maintaining a tiny waist. She was also a deeply unhappy and restless soul. She hated the stiff, suffocating etiquette of the Vienna. After the death of her son Rudolf, she was consumed by a profound, inconsolable melancholy. She dressed only in black for the rest of her life and travelled restlessly across Europe, a wandering wraith trying to outrun her own sorrow. In September 1898, she was in Geneva, Switzerland. As she was walking to board a lake steamer, a young Italian anarchist named Luigi Lucani ran towards her. He appeared to... It felt like a minor blow. The Empress, helped by her lady, in waiting stood up and even continued to the boat. It was only once on board that she collapsed. Lucani hadn't punched her. He had stabbed her directly in the heart with a sharpened stiletto, a thin industrial file. The wound was tiny, but it was fatal. The tight grip of her corset had momentarily staunched the bleeding. The assassination was shocking in its randomness. Lucchesi didn't even know who she was. He had simply wanted to kill a royal, any royal, to make a political statement. The most beautiful and melancholic empress in Europe was murdered by a nobody for no reason at all. Emperor Franz Joseph, now an old man, had lost his brother, his son, and his wife to violence and despair. He reportedly whispered to an aide, but it had saved its masterstroke for last after Rudolph's suicide. The new heir to the throne was Franz Joseph's nephew, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He was a difficult, ill-tempered man, but he was the future. In 1900, he made a controversial marriage to a lady in waiting, Countess Sophie Chotek. It was a morganatic marriage, meaning she was considered he had to renounce succession rights for his future children in order to marry the woman he loved. It was a rare instance of a Habsburg choosing love over dynastic duty. On the 28th of June, 1914, the Archduke and his wife Sophie were on an official visit to Sarajevo, the capital of the Austro-Hungarian province of Bosnia. The date was heavy with dark irony. It was their 14th for Sophie, who was usually barred from appearing next to her husband at official state functions because of her lower rank. This trip was a rare chance for her to be honored at his side. The city was seething with Serbian nationalism. A group of young assassins, armed and trained by a secret society called the Black Hand, was waiting for them. The first assassination attempt that morning failed. A bomb was thrown at the Archduke's motorcade. Franz Ferdinand was furious, but insisted on continuing with the day's events. After a speech at the town hall, he decided to change his plans and visit the injured officers in the hospital. But nobody told the driver of the new route. The driver took a wrong turn onto a side street. As he tried to back the car up, it stalled. And by a 1 in a million chance, it stalled directly in front of a delicatessen where one of the conspirators, a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip, had gone after the failed bombing. Princip couldn't believe his luck. He stepped forward, drew his pistol, and fired 2 shots from point-blank range. The first bullet hit Sophie in the abdomen as she collapsed. The Archduke cried out, "Sophie, don't die, live for our children." The second bullet struck him in the neck. They were both dead within minutes. Those 2 shots were the final, apocalyptic fulfillment of the Habsburg curse. It was the spark that lit the kindling of a Europe already primed for war. The assassination gave Austria, Hungary the pretext to issue an ultimatum to Serbia. Alliances clicked into place like clockwork. Russia mobilized to protect Serbia. Germany backed Austria. France backed Russia. Britain was drawn in within weeks. The continent was engulfed in the Great War, the war to end all wars, World War I, 4 years of industrial slaughter that claimed 20 million lives. The war shattered the old world, and at the end of it, in 1918, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the 600-year-old domain of the Habsburgs, ceased to exist. The last emperor was forced into exile. The Habsburg curse hadn't just killed an heir, it had killed an empire. It had killed an entire era, a chain of tragedies, an execution, a suicide, an assassination, and one final fateful wrong turn had brought the most powerful dynasty in Europe to utter ruin and plunged the entire world into a cataclysm of fire and blood. A string of grim coincidences, statistical anomalies in the bloody theatre of history. Or are we seeing the evidence of something else? A darker pattern where a single venomous whisper from a burning Templar, a wronged witch, or the very blood in one's veins can echo through centuries, toppling thrones, breaking hearts, and rewriting the fate of nations. History tells us what happened. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and give it a like to support us. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.